Hey friends, welcome to Bokeh, a podcast exploring the ever-blurring lines between the personal and business lives of professional photographers. This is your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm happy that you can join me today in connecting with photographers and entrepreneurs as we discuss photography, business, and, oh yeah, that sometimes messy thing that we call life. This podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. Just visit photographersedit.com. All right, Bokeh Podcast listeners, thanks so much for joining us yet again for another episode and kind of a new topic, or at least a different take on a topic. I'm here with my new friend, Taylor Fisher. Thank you so much, Taylor, for making time for Bokeh.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, and we're going to, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'm excited to kind of get to know you a little bit better. I'm at your website right now and I'm intrigued already. So we'll get to that here in just a second. But we normally start off the podcast with something that we call our technique for time. And very simply, I'm curious if there is a particular workflow tip or technique that you utilize in your life as a photography business owner to create more time for yourself and your family.
Yeah. So honestly, gosh, it was probably back in 2015. We had a pretty crazy year. We had booked 40 weddings that year, and it was really only our second year shooting together as a couple and shooting in Colorado. We had a little over 40 weddings, and I just had a meltdown in a Starbucks just because I was totally burnt out from the editing, from shooting creatively. I felt like we were kind of stagnant just because we had been shooting so much. And it was then that, one, we got in touch with you guys, with Photographers Edit, and two, we decided that we were going to take Sundays off. And that was a huge decision for us. And it was really stressful, but we had to be super, super diligent about doing that. We were really nervous about losing business and kind of upsetting clients by not working on Sundays. But by doing that, it's made a world of difference. But I think my biggest piece of advice for technique for time is just being super diligent about it, because it doesn't just happen. And we've had months where we tell ourselves, well, we'll take a break here and once we're done with this project, or once we're done with this wedding. But if you're not diligent about carving out that time and making time for your family and for yourself, then it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you bring this up. I was actually just having a conversation with a photographer out of Georgia, Bobby Brinkman, who was making a very similar point. She, interestingly enough, actually schedules Wednesdays off. And that was something that I hadn't heard before. I thought it was kind of cool. You schedule it midweek.
Yeah, that's really smart.
It is. But either way, whatever day that our listeners choose, I think setting at least a day aside a week where you're able to shut your computers down, even put your phones down and not do work is a good thing. It's nice mentally to take a break. I know as of late in the last month or two in particular, I've just been going 100 miles an hour. It seems like pretty consistently. And even at the end of the day, my mind is just kind of in warp drive, and I have to kind of come up with a way, actually, fortunately, that helps me kind of relax my mind and calm down a little bit for the sake of just getting decent sleep. But we have to do that in kind of a larger scale by taking time off. And I love that you guys are very just proactive about setting a particular day aside. And that's certainly going to pay off. This is something that I actually used to do with my kids. We would do something called Fun Sunday. Sunday was the day that the kids knew that like computers get closed and they get dedicated time. And of course, we'll spend time with them at other points during the week. But this was a day where mom and dad weren't going to be working. And they knew that. And it also kind of created some accountability, which was an interesting thing. We ended up moving that to actually, it started with Fun Monday, and then we moved it back to Fun Sunday once the kids started in school. My son started in school. But yeah, creating that day off is really important. You mentioned Photographers Edit, and I certainly didn't ask for the plug. I appreciate you mentioning editing, but when you're shooting 40...
Oh gosh, I felt awful. I called and I was just sobbing. So I feel bad for whoever I ended up talking to, because it was just one of those breaking points that I think a lot of people go through. Which, I mean, it's a blessing to have a business take off and feel like you're being really successful. But then, sometimes you just hit that wall where you're not really sure what direction you're supposed to go in. So yeah.
Well, I'm just glad that you've found benefit from that. I know it's a big deal well, first of all, to be shooting 40 weddings and to manage the editing from that, I've actually been in that very place myself, so I know how tough that can be. But then to give that up, and there's kind of the apprehension of, is this going to work? And, the idea of handing kind of your baby over to somebody else to take care of your imagery is a big deal. But thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be able to work with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great working with you guys.
Well, and I have to say too that again, for those listening in, if you haven't had the opportunity to check out Taylor and her husband Mike's website, if you just go to taylorjonesphotography.com, just like it sounds, pretty straightforward, you can see some of their beautiful imagery. Speaking of imagery, and I'm actually on your About Us page right now, and this particularly intrigued me. I love horses. I've never really had the opportunity.
Oh, do you?
Oh yeah, I've never had the opportunity to own them myself, but I just think they're beautiful, beautiful animals. And there's this picture of you and Mike on horses. Is that something that you guys get to do regularly?
Yeah, so it's funny. We are totally not, to be cheesy, but a cart before the horse kind of couple. We don't really, I mean, we think things through to a degree, but we don't let nerves kind of stop us from doing something that we want to do. And
I love it.
Yeah, neither Mike and I had grown up with horses. We didn't really know much of anything about horses, but we were interested in them, and we really wanted to have one. And we found just this wonderful, wonderful horse. His name was Timber. He was our first horse. And he was so patient. He was bomb proof, and he let us kind of make mistakes with him. And I mean, we didn't know how to put on a bit whenever we got him. So I'm sure we did it upside down and made it uncomfortable for him a couple of times. But he was such a great horse. And we actually bought our ranch, which was another cart before the horse kind of thing. We
Wow.
didn't. Yeah, we bought a ranch about 2 hours from where we were living near Denver. And unfortunately, about a week before we moved him out to the ranch, he passed away.
Oh no.
But yeah, but in the photo, those were our other two horses that we got. And it was that was one of the things that we were able to do once we decided to start taking Sundays off. We were able to go horseback riding. I mean, we're not like barrel racers or anything. So it was just nice trail rides. Out in Colorado, we were able to take our horses out. We just had a son. He's about 6 months old now. So I wasn't able to go horseback riding during the pregnancy, and we're
Sure.
still trying to figure out how to fit in the time. But it was definitely one of those things that we really wanted to start doing once we did take some time for ourselves.
That's so cool. I mean, for those of you listening in, and this is a totally random kind of off topic, but if you've never been horseback riding before, you've got to give it a shot. First of all, horses just are beautiful, beautiful animals, but also the experience of having the opportunity to be able to ride an animal that is so much bigger and more powerful than you are is a bit of a humbling experience too.
It's so humbling to feel kind of out of control is a really cool experience.
Well, and speaking of, I also noticed on that About Us page that Mike mentions motorcycles. Do you guys ride motorcycles together?
Yes. Oh gosh, I do not. But Mike pretty much came out of the womb on two wheels. He's had a motorcycle since he was, I think he was like 2 when his dad got him his first motorcycle. It was this little yellow, like banana looking motorcycle.
Yeah.
But yeah, he actually raced dirt bikes for a really long time. And he is right now, he's the creative director for a motorcycle magazine. So he lived and breathed motorcycles. He actually did sports photography for the dirt bike community, and he did videography for the dirt bike community. So whenever we met, it was kind of one of those things where he had all the equipment, and I just switched him over to shooting brides and weddings instead of motorcycles and dirt bikes. So it was a pretty fun transition for him. But yeah, he's been racing and living and breathing motorcycles for a long time.
Well, to our conversation about doing something that kind of scares you and pushes you outside your comfort zone and makes you realize how kind of tiny you are, that is yeah. Another experience that I've fortunately had the opportunity to delve into in the last couple of years, and it's just been absolutely incredible. It's totally taken me, and it's also, I mean, technically challenging too. As much as we are so obsessed with photography as photographers and art, and then of course running a business. It's nice to have something that enables you to break out of what you normally spend time doing, that can also be challenging, can force you to grow or cause you to grow. It's motorcycle riding is definitely one of those things. But
yeah, absolutely. I did try riding a dirt bike once. It was one of our family friends. I think she was 12 at the time, so it was a pretty small bike, and I haven't done it ever since then. But I love jumping on the back of the motorcycle with Mike. That's one of our favorite things to do as well, especially in Colorado. There's so many amazing places to ride. And so honestly, we're trying to plan a date night this week, and we haven't been able to take the motorcycle out since our son was born. So we're really excited to get to do a date night and go do some trail riding.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there really isn't anything like it. That picture of you guys on the horses, is that on your ranch?
Yeah. So that was, oh gosh, I think we had just moved to the ranch maybe 2 months earlier. And so, yeah, that was pretty fresh after we moved here. We've been here for 2 years now, but that was pretty shortly after we moved, and we just love it here. It's in a teeny little town called Nathrop, Colorado, and most people have never heard of it. So the other towns that it's close to is Salida, Colorado, and Buena Vista, and it's just amazing. It's one of the only places, I think, I'm not sure if it's in the world, if I'm exaggerating, but where you can see like where the valley floor is, and you can see the mountains just rising up from the valley floor. There's like a certain number of, like 7,000 or 9,000 feet of elevation.
Oh my word.
Yeah, maybe not that much. I might be exaggerating, but I think at least in Colorado, it's one of the few places you can go and just see the mountains actually coming up from the valley floor. And it's a beautiful, beautiful area of Colorado. The community here is so wonderful. It's a lot of young families, quite a few photographers actually, and we're all friends, which is really nice. But yeah, it's a great place to be.
That's beautiful. I've had the opportunity to spend some time in Colorado, but the idea of being able to live in that environment consistently, I'm so jealous already. Even just listening to you describe it, it sounds absolutely amazing.
Oh, it is, and it's funny because we have a lot of friends tell us that, we're living their dream, or they are jealous. And for us, it was just kind of a no brainer. I mean, and again, we were terrified making this decision to buy the ranch and move, an extra 2 hours away from home and away from Denver. We had no idea how it would affect the business, but it was, thankfully, Mike is kind of a fearless person. Whenever he makes decisions, he makes them and sticks to them. And we just decided if this doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out, and we'll kind of go back to square one. But I mean, we've totally been blessed, more than we ever thought that we would, moving out here.
I love it. Share something, and you've already kind of led us into your life, and I really appreciate that. But kind of share something that maybe is random that most people wouldn't know about you guys.
Oh gosh, so about us as a couple. I mean, again, I kind of say that we're a cart before the horse kind of couple, which I think for us has luckily worked out very well for us. We were watching HGTV one night in our apartment when we were dating, and decided to call a mortgage lender and get approved for a house, and bought a house and flipped it. And we don't really think too much about making big, scary decisions that I think a lot of our family and friends might mull over for, months or even years before they actually execute it. And so we kind of did the same thing with the photography business. At the time we were dating, we were out camping in Colorado one night, and I just really wasn't happy with the job that I was in. I did not realize that I was not a 9-to-5 kind of person and work on weekends kind of person, but I was just not happy. And again, we'd only been dating for about 6 months, and Mike told me, well, if you ever want to quit your job, whether it's in 2 days or 2 years, I totally support you, and we will figure it out and make it work. And luckily for me, Mike went to business and marketing school here in Colorado, in Denver. And so he had that business mindset. And it wasn't 2 days later that I walked in and quit my job. And we just kind of hit the ground running at that point. And so, as far as a couple, we just kind of make decisions and then execute them. But
what do you think enables you to do that? Because that's not a tendency that most people have, especially in the photography industry, kind of the artist mindset. We're very emotionally driven, and kind of riding that emotional roller coaster can get in the way of just making simple, logical choices sometimes. What enables you guys to do that?
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I feel like I'm a little more reserved than Mike is, but at the same time, I mean, I packed up my life when I was 22 and put everything I could into my little Corolla and moved out to Colorado, and didn't really know what was going to happen, who I would meet, what direction my life was going to go in. But I think just making a couple scary decisions, once you kind of see how they pan out, it gets a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so with the photography, that was kind of the first scary decision that we both made as a couple. Mike was working full time, and he was very adamant that I do not work any other jobs. He was like, if you don't give this 110%, you will not be successful. But if you can give this 110% of your time and energy, then you just can't fail. And he was so sure about it. And so, and I mean, honestly, Nathan, at that time, I'd only shot 2 weddings, and they were for my cousins. So, I mean, it's not like I had been doing this for, years and just wasn't really sure if I could turn it into a career. I love photography. I would love to run my own business. I feel like I have the personality for it. Maybe we should go for it. So that I think having Mike's confidence in he's totally confident in just making big, scary decisions, whether it's buying a house, selling a house, buying a ranch, getting alpacas. We just got alpacas last year. We know nothing about alpacas, but it was like, well, what's the worst that can happen? And so we got a little herd of alpacas. I mean, it's just been such a roller coaster of fun and exciting decisions. But I honestly don't know why it just kind of comes easy for us. And I totally think that it's a personality thing, but I also think that once you start making those hard decisions, it just gets easier and easier to make them, and then get really excited about what the outcome is going to be.
Well, I hear, really we could, and I almost want to do a whole separate podcast episode just on this topic, because I think it's a really important one. I've certainly seen the benefits of my own life of just making decisions and going for it. And I've talked before, even about something as not necessarily simple, but it's certainly relevant to the conversation, like skydiving, where I'm scared to death of heights. Still am, really.
Yeah, no way.
but taking that plane ride up to between 12 and 15,000 feet, and just making a choice to kind of push the fear out of my mind. And then, fortunately, when you jump for the first time, you're going in tandem with somebody who has experience jumping. And so you're ultimately not kind of responsible for the actual choice of jumping out of the plane. So it makes it a little bit easier. But there's some similarities there too to what you were talking about. I'm hearing 2 elements that enable you to be able to make these choices. One is to have somebody on your side, somebody that's got your back. And it's very similar in that sense to skydiving, in that you've got somebody who has confidence that can enable you to make those decisions. And that makes all the difference in the world, to have somebody or a group of people that have got your back. And then the other thing that you mentioned, I think is interesting and should be pointed out, is you said in purchasing the alpacas that, what's the worst that can happen, right? And I think there's an assumption a lot of times in making decisions that you have to know that something is going to, quote, be okay or even perfect.
Yeah.
And yet, worst case scenario, you make a change of direction and you go a different direction, or you make a different choice, you make an adjustment. And the worst that can happen is that you end up making a decision to do something different in the end. And so I think that kind of flexible mentality, understanding that you may have to course correct, also enables you to be able to step out and do something that you don't necessarily know the end result of.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I mean, if people are wanting to kind of be a little more fearless, I think just making simple decisions like that was one of the first things that I really fell in love with Mike, was that if he made a decision, he was sticking to it. If it was, hey, let's go camping this weekend, there was no question in my mind if we were going to go camping this weekend. There was no, well, maybe something will come up, maybe the weather won't be good. Didn't matter. We were going no matter what the weather looked like, no matter what phone calls we ended up getting, we were going to go camping. And so I think building that trust in yourself, if you're not married or if you're not, in a relationship, just building that trust with yourself. Like, okay, I can make a decision. I can stick to it.
Yeah.
And XYZ opportunities came out of this one small decision that I ended up making.
That's cool. I love it. We may have to come back and do another episode on that. It's a really great topic.
That.
And maybe we can get Mike involved in the conversation too. That'd be a lot of fun.
That sounds great. Yeah, we would love that.
And talk to us a little bit about your photography business. I know that you're offering wedding photography and, of course, the beautiful environment that is Colorado. But what's your photography business's brand position? What sets you apart from other photographers in your market?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it's kind of hard in Colorado. We obviously love the mountains, but if you're living in Colorado, chances are you love the mountains. So I think for Mike and I, we are a husband and wife team, and there are a handful of husband and wife wedding photographers in the area, and we're friends with all of them. But I honestly think that's one of the things that makes us stand out, because a lot of our couples who do find us had really no idea that husbands and wives could shoot together or that they'd want to shoot together. So I guess if I had to sum it up, I'd say we're kind of more of a country husband and wife team. If you saw Mike here at our house, you would never, ever, ever, ever imagine that he goes to a wedding, to three weddings in a weekend. He's got his boots on, he's got his cowboy hat on.
Yeah.
And so I think that really helps us resonate with couples and kind of get grounded with couples when they realize, oh, they're just normal people. We're not, there's nothing super special about us, but we do gather our inspiration from being in the mountains, which is why we've lived in the mountains for the last 5-6 years.
Wow.
And we love working with couples who are getting married in the mountains and reciting their vows in the mountains. I think it's just kind of an inspirational place for everybody involved. So,
and how would you say that you set the tone for that? We were talking about the idea of a brand position, but you're describing this kind of, you're the country wedding photographers almost. How do you communicate that feeling, that vibe to potential clients?
Yeah. So I think honestly, for us, it comes pretty easy. And I think if you're true to, which this sounds so corny, but if you're true to who you are, your business will reflect that. And it just always amazes me that people that try to copy other people, try to copy other photographers, because it's just not sincere. And so for us, it just comes kind of easy. We really worked hard on our website these last couple of years on getting our brand out there, because obviously it's under my maiden name, the Taylor Jones Photography. And unfortunately, by the time we got married, we had booked and shot quite a few weddings that we couldn't really change the business name at that point.
Sure.
But we really wanted to let people know that we are a husband and wife team, despite that it's using my maiden name. And so we spent a lot of work on the website, getting our personalities out there. And then the brand just kind of formed around our personalities. Like you said, if you go to our About Us page, it's pictures of us on our horses at our ranch. Our Instagram feed is very personal. We obviously, post photos of our couples, but like just last weekend, I posted a picture of us camping with our son in our new little teardrop trailer. And so,
so cool.
We definitely try to be open and transparent with people. And honestly, it's really paid back like tenfold being open and honest, because quite frankly, we haven't but we haven't met with a couple. We've met with one of our 2018 couples, and we've got about 30 weddings booked for this year.
Wow.
And that's just because people go to our website, they go to our Instagram, they know who we are, what we're about, they're ready to book, no reason to get together and hang out. And so that's been a really crazy change for us, because we used to meet with every couple and go out for drinks or go out for dinner. But I think, kind of putting who we are and what we're about pretty clearly on our website has made a huge difference in how the business functions and the kind of couples that we're booking.
This is going to be a beautiful segue really into our focus and conversation today, which has to do with how to effectively design your photography business. And you're going to kind of break that down for us. But how would you say, I mean, you made an interesting point, which is, of course, the significance of being yourself. And it does sound kind of cliche. We hear it a lot these days. It could probably mean different things to different people. But how do you choose to make sure that your brand effectively reflects who you really are, while also being aware of the market and the market trends so that that there isn't a disconnect. Because somebody could say, hey, this is who I am, but they're not paying close attention to what brides are actually looking for example. And so maybe there's got to be a healthy balance between very effectively showing who you are with also being aware of what brides are looking for. Is there a balance to be had in there somewhere? What does that look like to you?
I do think so. I mean, I think, obviously if you're, still in that party phase and your idea of fun is going to bars every night, you don't want to try to reflect that in your business. But kind of digging deeper and thinking, okay, who am I? I love the mountains. Okay, what do I love about the mountains? And honestly, whenever we did our branding, so whenever I quit my job, we literally, Mike picked me up that day because they told me to go ahead and leave that day. They were like, we don't need 2 weeks. You're done.
Wow.
So Mike came and picked me up, and he had packed our bags, and we went to Telluride and Ouray for a week. It was a 6-hour drive, and I was crying for most of it because I was just terrified. I had no idea what I had just done. I didn't know anything about running a business. All I knew was I had a camera and I loved taking photos.
Yeah.
So we went to one of the most mountainy part of the mountains of Colorado and spent a week brainstorming, branding, and we physically went to where we love to be to decide this is the direction that our business should go in, and this is what the branding should look like, and this is what our logo should reflect. And I think there's definitely a standard that brides have, but it's not rocket science. People want someone who's trustworthy, who's professional, who is relatable. And I think those top 3 things can pretty much book any bride. It's just a matter of which bride that you want to work with, which couple you want to work with. And so making your branding who you are, but then also, recognizing, okay, it at least needs to be professional and it has to be a trustworthy branding, which kind of leads into the design portion of our conversation. But yeah, I think that there is a balance, but it's not like a fine line. You just have to kind of keep in mind what the most important part of being in this industry is.
What would you say the toughest lesson is that you've learned as a business owner so far?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard question because I feel like becoming, whenever you start running a business, it's kind of like becoming a new parent. There's this huge learning curve.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, in that first year, my gosh, like things just change so much.
Yeah.
And kind of like, being a parent, you watch your baby business grow so much in that first year. And it's all based off of decisions that you make and the lessons that you learn that kind of shapes and molds your business into what it is. But I think the biggest thing that I learned, and again, this was kind of one of those cliche things that was super annoying to hear when you're starting out, but it's that you can't be everything to everyone. And I think whenever you are starting out, or even if you've been in the industry for a long time, nobody trusts a jack of all trades. And so, you don't want to be that person who's like, I shoot weddings and I'll shoot your dog and your cat. And, oh, you're selling your home. Well, I'll go ahead and shoot the real estate photos for that too. And while I'm at it, I'll shoot your kids playing basketball next week and then get photos of the muffins that you wanted for your new food blog. So it's Nobody trusts somebody who can do it all, even if you can't, even if you're fantastic at all those things. Honing in and really picking what you're passionate about will really repay you more than trying to do everything for everyone. And I think, initially, whenever we started out, we had families and seniors and weddings all over the website. And it's kind of gone into the direction of working as a husband and wife for weddings. And we totally shoot families, and especially as our couples grow from getting married to being parents and growing their family, we definitely want to be a part of those milestones. But if you go to our website, then on the homepage, it is all weddings. And if you go up to the menu, there's a section where you can find, families and proposals are like the 2 big things that we have on there. But yeah, I think just realizing and accepting that you cannot be everything to everyone. as much as you want to, and but you just can't.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we've had any guests on the Boca podcast that have specifically said that people will have a hard time trusting you. So I'm curious if you'll break that down. What do you mean by that, and why do you think that is?
You know what? I'm not sure why it is, but if you can imagine, if wedding days are such a huge day. So if you can imagine putting it in a different world, like, okay, I have to have surgery on my stomach. And I go to this doctor and he's like, great, I'm going to do your surgery. And while I'm at it, you know what? I might as well clean your teeth because you probably haven't been to the dentist. If you want, we'll just give you a pedicure while you're here. And then, and then we'll also babysit your dogs and your son while you're in here. So you don't have to really, you just be like, wait. I hired you to do this one job. Why would you cover all my other bases?
Makes sense.
Now, if you get, surgery on your stomach, and then while you're there recovering, your doctor says, hey, do you want us to do XYZ while you're here? Then maybe that's fine. So, but I mean, it's just, if you put it into a different industry, or, if a plumber comes to your house and he's like, well, I'm here, I can do your electricity. It's just one of those things where you go from trusting this person to not trusting them at all, because you're like, well, do you even know what you're good at and what you can deliver on this one project? So it's such a funny thing, because again, when you're starting out, you aren't really sure. You're kind of testing the water, and you're not really sure what it is that you're going to be passionate about and which direction you're going to go in.
No, I don't think I've quite heard it described that way before, but that makes sense. You ultimately do want to work with somebody who specializes in the particular field of photography that you're looking for. And of course, this is something that we've discussed on the podcast before, that the significance of being a specialist, especially when it comes to marketing, it makes it so much easier to be able to develop and market a brand if you have a specialty.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And ultimately to set yourself apart too. I mean, if you're going to a networking meeting and you say, I'm a photographer, I mean, I experienced this firsthand before, locally, listening to other photographers describe themselves as, quote, specialists, but then listing off, 5 different things that they were photographing.
Yeah.
You're obviously not a specialist in that point. It certainly makes it easier to develop a brand when you do have a specialty, and there's a likelihood too that, as you pointed out, that potential client may trust you more with that specialty. Kind of switching gears a little bit, and speaking of gear, actually, what's something that is in your gear bag that's a favorite, maybe a camera body or lens or accessory that you might want to tell our listeners about?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited about this question. So whenever we shoot, we have, I mean, you can go to our website and just see, we're very emotion-based photographers. We definitely thrive off of our couples' relationships and their emotion. And yes, we live in Colorado and it's beautiful. And 99% of the time we have them in a beautiful location. But we're very focused on our couple and their story. But having said that, we just got 2 new wide angle lenses. We kind of trusted our photographer friends who told us that the Sigma Art series was just, on point. And so we got the 35 millimeter and the 24 millimeter, and we have been having so much fun with those lenses. We just got them a couple weeks ago, and normally we shoot like our 50 millimeter and 85 never left our cameras, and we actually shoot Nikon. We shoot with a D750 bodies. So having that full frame with 2 new wide angle lenses has been really cool and really a new challenge for us, because we still want to capture our couple's relationship and emotion while getting more of that landscape in the frame. So it's been a really cool challenge, and Mike loves the 24 and I love the 35. So we're kind of like, bumping into each other, trying to push the other out of the way to get the shots that we want. But yeah, those Sigma Art lenses are just incredible. We were kind of nervous straying from Nikon lenses, but they've been a really cool addition to our gear.
That's awesome. We'll make sure to link to those in the show notes too. I know the Sigma Art lenses have picked up popularity. I mean, it's that we've had probably multiple guests on at this point that have talked about them, and I'm certainly seeing it online as well. So Now it makes me want to get some, or at least give some a try. That sounds really, really lovely.
Yeah, I felt super hipster buying them because I feel like all the photographers I know who have them are like way hipster. But yeah, no, I actually was shooting in Breckenridge last night, and I just could not get enough of shooting with that 35 and 24 and just getting so much into frame, but still, again, trying to make it all about the couple was just so fun to kind of challenge myself and kind of relearn how to shoot with a wide angle lens.
That's really cool. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to kind of transition into our focus today, which, as I mentioned earlier, has to do with how we design our photography business. And it's a loaded topic and really a broad topic, but I'm curious if you'll get us started with how you define the word design for the sake of this conversation, because it's a word that's thrown around quite a bit. I think a lot of photographers think about it, and just specifically in relation to putting together a website, but how would you define design for the sake of this conversation?
Yeah. So whenever I talk about design, I'm mainly referring to the branding of your business, whether it's your business logo, the design of your website, or even something as simple as designing your email signature. It's totally an underrated element. And in my opinion, and certainly in Mike's opinion, it's the foundation and the most critical base to a business. It's kind of I'll dive more into this, but the difference between being trustworthy and being not trustworthy.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful statement. Yeah, I'm curious to dig into that here in just a little bit. What would you say, and I know you're going to kind of break this down in detail, but to sum it up, maybe what would you say is the significance of design to building a healthy, growing photography business? Because I think a lot of photographers, first of all, are thinking about just the photography itself, right? I need to be a good artist and create beautiful imagery for my clients. We put a lot of emphasis here on the podcast about business, really business over photography, realizing that probably 80% or even more than that of what we do as photographers in order to create a sustainable business has to do with being an intelligent business owner. But what role does design play in building a healthy, growing business?
Yeah, so I think kind of merging two questions or ideas together, with whether it's using design to help your business grow or leading it to kind of suffering if business is not important.
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to a breakdown like this. Without professional design and branding, you kind of lack credibility. Without credibility, you lack trust from your target market, whoever your target market is. And without that trust, you have no clients. And so obviously design is more critical in some industries than in others, but with such a creative-based business like photography, it's totally a necessity. Whoever your clients are, whoever your target market is, they're trusting you with the photography of their wedding, which is an event, obviously, for most people only happens once in their life. And the photos you take are the only tangible memories that they'll have of that biggest day of their life. And if your branding is sloppy, if your website's not professional, if your logo, looks like it was made in Microsoft Word with like papyrus, just makes my every time we see like a truck drive by with papyrus, we just cringe.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so, and especially if your marketing materials have grammatical errors, these are all seemingly small things, but to a potential bride or, again, whoever your target market is, it can absolutely make a difference between booking, a $5,000 wedding or never seeing a penny or even an inquiry from that client. I'm not necessarily saying that design is everything, but obviously you have to back up the design with having charisma and personality that makes your clients comfortable with you and provide, quality work. But without professional design, you won't even likely have the opportunity to meet or speak with or even know about the clients that you've missed because they'll have never contacted you.
Well, and you actually, in our conversation kind of leading up to this interview today, you not only mentioned your passion for design, and it's largely why we're talking about this today, but you broke it down into 4 elements and where you've put emphasis on design. And this is for your brand to begin with, your website, business cards, which is an interesting topic in and of itself. I'm curious to hear your take on that. And then just general marketing. Will you kind of walk our listeners through how you've considered design for each of those elements of your business?
Yeah, for sure. So whenever we started out, like I said earlier, Nathan, we only had 2 weddings in our portfolio, and they were both family members. And I mean, you can only imagine how many times you've heard this story where people are like, I shot 2 weddings, I'm going to start a business, which is totally fine. But can you imagine a bride actually hiring a photographer who's only shot 2 weddings? Most brides want that peace of mind, and they gain that peace of mind through trust. And like I said earlier, to gain their trust and convince these brides that we are going to meet or exceed their expectations, we personally relied heavily on design. And again, like I said, Mike's been a creative director for a magazine for about 15 years. He's been with the magazine. So we obviously had that tool, and we knew that we had to leverage that into our business. So when we started out, we carefully designed the logo with clean fonts and colors that reflected our personalities. And I'm not saying that, everything revolves around fonts and logos, but whenever you're creating a brand, it's certainly very, very important. And then we, from there, created marketing campaigns that use professionally designed flyers and Facebook ads. And then with our business cards, we got creative with like rounded corners, spot UV gloss. And at one point, we even had wood business cards. And at that point, it was kind of a whatever it takes to make us stand out in a market that usually seems very overwhelmingly saturated. We just knew we had to come up with just a few things. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel, but we had to come up with a few things to really make us stand out. For our website, it's funny because we've actually had a couple of copyright infringements on our website this year. And it's so disheartening because we spent years building this website and pouring ourselves into this website. And it's so much more than just, we picked a really cool theme. On our website, it wasn't just important to focus on the layout and the colors, and like the navigation and the images that we picked, but it was equally important to make all the text on the page look good. It's a field known as typography, and it's totally an art in and of itself. There were certain things we had to think of, like which fonts work well together, which fonts should be large and bold, where is the reader's eye drawn to when they first go to our web page. And it's amazing how subtle differences in text and text layout can completely change the look and professionalism of a website.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I think ultimately, oftentimes as a small business, you have to give the appearance that you're bigger than you are and that you have more experience than you do. And it's not immoral to do that, assuming you can confidently, do the job that you're being asked to do. It's just a matter of convincing your client to trust you and give you the opportunity to prove yourself. So anyway, having said all that, by focusing on the design, in just 1 year with only, again, 2 weddings under our belt, we were able to book 25 Colorado weddings.
Wow.
For the following wedding season. And we spent, again, months designing our logo and website. It wasn't overnight. And if you do go to our like about us page, you'll see that like in my column and in Mike's column, we picked every single word on there is picked very specifically so that they are both of our about us sections lined up and ended at the same point. And you can see where there's that photo of us where I'm on Mike's back, and then there's text next to it. We, again, chose every single word to line up perfectly so that the text ended with the photo. Just very small things like that, picking subheaders and headers and what fonts should be bold. Again, it was a lot of work. And like I said earlier, again, we haven't had to meet with any except one of our 2018 and 2019 couples, just because people will call us and be like, we love the website. This is the most professional looking, eye-pleasing, informative website we have ever seen. We're booking you guys. We already know what you're about. We know you're professional. We know you deliver quality. We're sold. So I know that was a lot of talking.
Not at all. Well, and before you get into the business cards and more detail, when it came to, you mentioned your logo a number of times and designing the logo, did you work with a professional designer, or was this something that you came up with on your own?
I did, but I'm married to him, so I kind of cheated on that.
Fair enough.
But it's one of those things. if I mean, this is kind of, I'll mention this later in the conversation, but if you have $3,000 to spend on starting a business, naturally as a photographer, you're like, well, I got to get this camera and this lens, and I got to buy this and this. Spend $2,500 of that on a website and hiring a designer to create branding, and spend $500 on the actual equipment. Because if you don't look professional, if you can't make yourself look bigger than you actually are, then you're not going to need to use the equipment anyway.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement. But I have to say though, I'm looking at, we see a lot of different logos in the industry. I've certainly been guilty of designing bad logos on my own, including, I think I may have even used papyrus font at one point way back in the day. So it's kind of funny that you bring that up. But I love the simplicity of your logo. The choice of just two colors is really, really nice. That you use the script font, but it's very easy to read. And that's a really big deal when it comes to choosing the font type, understanding that somebody has to be able to read that word mark or the logo if it's small. And
and I mean, on a website, it is not big. Your logo is very rarely big. Business cards are small, websites are even smaller. So yeah, I'm indifferent about scripty fonts because I can't read 99% of the photographers who use scripty font. But with this one, we actually opened this in InDesign and made it a little thicker and a little bolder. But this was a very intentional. We actually just rebranded last year, and it was very intentional. It took weeks of, we looked through so many fonts. We looked through so many, not necessarily color options, but something that definitely brought in the masculinity of Mike, but still had that feminine touch for our clientele, which was brides, and having that little bit of coral was very intentionally picked for the market that we're in. So everything that we did for that logo was very intentional. It wasn't just slapped together. I mean, we spent a lot of time, even like the kerning between the R and the J. We lost sleep over that. Like, should we do 3 pixels or 5 pixels? Like, it was just, it was very.
It really makes a significant difference, though, and I think a lot of people. And by the way, for those listening in, kerning is just very simply the separation or the distance, if you will, between. The lettering can make a significant difference when you're, and a lot of time that difference, you may not be able to point to what it is, but it makes a huge difference visually. I do like too the fact that you didn't just go with a simple word mark, but that you added the visual element of the mountains. And of course, that's an accurate reflection of your brand as well. And I don't even know if you thought about this, but I'm looking again, I'm still on the About Us page because I love being able to have a picture of you guys as I'm talking to you in front of me. But the darker color of Taylor, the lighter color of Jones actually is a mirror of the darker clothing that Mike is wearing in that picture and the lighter clothing that you're wearing in the picture
so
as
funny.
well, which is pretty cool.
I never even noticed it.
And you've got the mountains in the background. I mean, it's kind of perfect.
Yeah. And I mean, again, even something as small as Mike and I both totally agree that marketing and design go hand in hand, but you can see on our website, all the subheaders and headers that we picked. Even in marketing, people will only read, if you're creating marketing material, people only read the first 7 words. Yes. And that is just one of those things that you learn in marketing. And so from a design perspective, it was, okay, how can we fit 7 or less words in XYZ spots on the website or with our marketing material? How can we make these 7 words look good and stand out? And I think it's really dawned on me in the last year that, I have friends who their work is just incredible and they don't have a logo. And I can't wrap my head around that because they're booking weddings and their work is just gorgeous, but they don't have not even they have a logo. It's just not professionally done. They just don't have a logo, period. And so I just can't understand how a brand has an identity without an identity. And so that I think it's really come to both of our attention in the last year, especially how important design is. And again, just making yourself appear bigger than you actually are, gaining that trust with your clientele. And again, we only had 2 weddings whenever we started this. And I totally think and can confidently say that design was the reason that we were able to book 25 weddings in that first year.
Well, you mentioned the number of words that most people are going to actually take the time to read, and I think that's an important point of conversation. We've certainly brought it up here on the podcast before, but we live in a noisy world, and I don't just mean audibly so, I mean digitally so, right? We're looking at tons of text all day, every day, especially if you're spending any time on Instagram or Facebook. And so the less that we're forcing our potential client to have to read through in order to get the information that they want, the better. They need to be able to capture that information as quickly as possible. And you guys have done a really good job. I think the only place that you've added a lot more text is on the actual reviews, where some brides are probably going to want to read about that full experience. And you've got wonderful clients who've given you kind of raving reviews, detailed reviews, which is really, really nice. But when it comes to getting the information, including even the packages that you offer on the pricing page, it's very, very simple, very straightforward. They don't have to scroll through a bunch of text to understand what it is that you're offering. And I think that's really important for the sake of capturing new clients.
Yeah, totally. And honestly, with our pricing page, we really had to work hard on the text design there, because we know people aren't going to read through all this text. But if we can at least, make certain things bold, certain things colorful, really, really hone in on the design element, then they will read it. And again, you can kind of see with like those 5 bullet points that we have on our pricing page, they all line up. There is not one that is longer than the other. They're all the same exact length. And so that was really hard to because not only are we constrained, because people probably aren't going to read it, we're constrained because we literally have to fit all these to make it take up the same amount of space. And so, whenever we do website critiques for people, that's the first thing that I look at is the design element, the logo, the colors. Does my eye go anywhere on their website, or you don't want to give a potential client any excuse to leave your website. And so making it as intriguing, making things pop whenever you hover over them or change color, doing everything you can with the design element to keep them on your website is the ultimate goal.
Well, again, kudos to you guys for creating, first of all, a really beautiful yet simple logo. It's easy to read. I love the simplicity of just a couple of colors.
Thank you.
Of course, you've carried that over into your website really, really nicely. Again, for those of you listening in, if you haven't seen Taylor and Mike's website, make sure you go to taylorjonesphotography.com. You mentioned business cards. Talk to us a little bit about how this design carries over to something like business cards, which I have to add, I'm surprised. We're in 2018, the fact that business cards is still a thing, but I realize that it's a reality. So it's important to even take some time in thinking about the design and layout of business cards, right?
Yeah, and it's so funny that you bring that up, because business cards are one of those things where I feel like every year we're like, is this not obsolete yet? Like, do people still hand these out? Yep. But I think ultimately your logo and website are your first impression, hands down. No questions asked. There, you very rarely meet people at the grocery store and you're like, oh, you're engaged. I'm a photographer. Your business card is very rarely nowadays your first impression. It's your website, your branding, your logo, the design that you put into making yourself look professional, look bigger than you are. But having said that, your business card can either make or break anything from that point forward. And so having a professionally made business card, and not just the 500 free ones from Vistaprint, can be a huge deal breaker. Whether how does it feel? It's the only tangible thing other than prints that you're going to give a potential client. And so, does it feel well made? Does it pop? Does it stand out in their wallet, or does it just blend in with the rest of the stuff that they have in their purse or their wallet? So whenever we made our business cards, we knew that they were more or less like the cherry on top of looking professional or not professional. And so we decided to go and just spend some extra money on an actual quality printer. And there's a lot of options out there. And yes, you're going to pay a little extra, but you don't need 10,000 business cards, maybe 100 by the time you're actually able to hand them all out. And so I think spending the money on that is totally critical. But we ended up doing 2 rounded corners on our business cards. So we have 2 sharp corners and 2 rounded corners, again, because we just wanted to stand out in some wallet. And then we have two sides of our business card, and one side has our logo on it. And it's just all of our pretty colors on a white backdrop. But we made that logo have a spot UV over it, which, if you don't know what a spot UV is, imagine like a matte business card with a glossy accent. And so our logo is that glossy accent. And then the other side just has, our contact, our name, some more of the fun colors put into it. But again, we just wanted some way to stand out again in people's wallets and their purse, because they're going to grab your card and toss it in their purse. And it's a sad realization. They're not going to hang it up on their fridge or frame it. But but whenever they do need to find it, you don't want them looking through all the other free business cards that somebody either printed at home or got as a promotion that feel kind of flimsy. You definitely want that quality, because I do think it's kind of that make or break. Like, wow, this feels professional. This feels like I can trust them, versus this feels like they printed it at home and there's smudges and it's ripped. So. Well,
and to our earlier point too, would you agree that it's important to keep the information on that card minimal as well, so they're not having to read through a bunch of text just to get the vital information?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that it's kind of in to put photos on a business card. We personally don't do that, because all it takes is for one photo that one person's like, I don't really like this, to not book you. Great point. All they had to do was actually go to your website and be like, wow, I love 100 of these photos, and there's only one that I kind of am not really a fan of. Yeah. But if that one that they weren't really a fan of was the one that you thought was just epic and put on your business card, then you've just missed out on that potential client. And so I think, having your logo, and then, your name, phone number, website, email, that's all you need. We've actually worked with people in designing business cards for them, and they want to put, again, real estate, wedding photographer, engagement shoots, family shoots. And it's like, all you want to do is get them to your website. Once you get them to your website, you have probably sold them, but you don't need them trying to filter through all this random stuff that's, quite frankly, pretty irrelevant at the point. At that time, it's completely irrelevant. You just want them to get to your site.
That's great advice. And then take us to how this translates to marketing material. And maybe this is your social media, or maybe you're actually giving potential clients tangible physical marketing material. What does the design element of your marketing efforts look like?
Yeah, so we spend like almost an embarrassing amount of time on actual marketing material, just because we'll design something and then we'll sit and stew on it, especially if it's going to go to the printer. We'll think about it, and then we'll make changes the next day, and then we'll come back to it a couple of days later. But I think for us, especially picking, 2 or 3 very striking images is important. But the actual design, I can't tell you how frustrated we get whenever we see text that doesn't line up, or there's, things aren't centered, or there's grammatical errors. I mean, it's just such small things, or like, again, the kerning or spacing between sentences is off. It's again, kind of that fine line of looking professional and looking like you really didn't care or have the time to put into your business. There are a lot of great resources out there. If you're not a designer, that's totally fine. There's a lot of great resources out there. There's designers that you can hire to execute what your vision is. And it really doesn't cost all that much, maybe $5 to $30 to have somebody design some marketing material for you that looks just incredible, is eye-catching, and really makes a statement as to who you are with your business, and how serious you take your business and reaching that potential client.
And what type of, are you printing out, I know some photographers will create magazines that encompass all that their business offers. Maybe they're creating just pamphlets or individual little brochures. Again, saying that out loud, even is kind of funny to me. We're in 2018. You think most things are digital, but if you are creating a tangible product marketing material for your business, what types of materials are you creating?
Yeah, so we've actually started designing a digital magazine, more or less just at to give to our couples after they book that kind of answers all the questions. But my goodness, I mean, we started that and we were months in and we were like, this is really time consuming, just because we were spending a lot of time on the layout and the design and the colors and what text that we needed to use and what text was going to fit and how the typography was going to look. So it was that ultimately became very time consuming. And so we're still working on designing that magazine. For us personally, we've done everything from, I'm not even kidding, soliciting material. Like we made business cards and hung them up on like the greater part of Boulder doors for people whenever we started, because I was like, I don't know what's going to work. So we just kind of got creative and we printed postcards that had some of our work on it and call us for this information. We printed bookmarks and dropped them off at libraries. We created Facebook posts. And honestly, I think that the Facebook marketing was the most time consuming part, because it's either going to captivate someone or it's not. And so we spent a really long time on the design of our Facebook ads. And that's honestly how we booked a lot of our weddings that first year, was using design to our advantage and designing these really nice, Facebook ads that just made sense. They were 7 words and they had one image and it was very clear and concise. We want to work, I don't remember what it said exactly, but there was a landing page that they went to on our website. We didn't just send them to, our homepage. There was a secret landing site that they ended up at with special pricing or whatever. But again, we spent a really long time on designing that landing page. It wasn't just thrown together. I mean, it had a lot of elements of design that kept them on that page and kept them wanting more and wanting to learn more and going to other pages on the website. But yeah, I think for us, social media and using design for social media. Again, like you said, we live in a very noisy world. And so something that doesn't look good, nobody's going to give the time of day to look at.
Yeah, certainly, it's true. And not only should it look good, but to your earlier point, I mean, 7 words and an ad, I think it's a brilliant example of that minimalism. I mean, you have to think through the words that you're actually putting there, but keeping the words to a minimum so that they don't have to spend a whole lot of time reading through the material is so important. People don't have a lot of time, and they're not going to make a lot of time. You got to think about that in the way that you design the materials that you're using for your marketing. So maybe we can get a picture of maybe one of those ads that you used, your business card. We can put that in the show notes for this podcast for our listeners to be able to see. But just in closing, would you mind just sharing a few ideas, kind of tangible takeaways for our listeners that they can consider or even implement in the development of their business, the way that they're implementing design in their business today?
Yeah, for sure. I think so. The first thing, I think first and foremost, Mike and I both agreed, is create a professional logo, or if you already have a logo, then reevaluate your logo. If you post it on Facebook or send your logo to family and friends, it's highly unlikely that they're going to say any usable feedback or anything really helpful, because nobody has the heart to say, that logo looks like crap. So do yourself a favor, hire a professional designer. I'm not trying to put like a plug in for us, but we love design. We love branding. We love helping businesses create that identity, whatever it is. So, reach out to a friend, reach out to somebody who really has a passion for design and specializes in design. And then they'll be able to, they'll ask you, any professional will ask you about your brand, who your target market is, the image that you want to project in your logo. It's not something that just gets slapped together in 30 seconds. Your brand begins with your logo. And so absolutely invest in it. And so that would be number one. Email a designer, get it out there, and start kind of brainstorming what it is that you want to portray in your business.
Perfect. Take us to number 2, if you will.
Number 2 is do the same for your website, if not more so. Your website is the single most important element in your marketing efforts and getting who you are out there into the community. Do not skimp here. There are oodles of templates available online. If you go to like themeforest.net or .com, I'm not sure which one it is, but ThemeForest has just thousands of website templates that are available online that you can kind of utilize as a starting point if you want. And they're great if you don't have any design capabilities. But if you don't have any design capabilities and you don't want to learn how to use a template, then absolutely invest in hiring a designer to help you. And like I said earlier, if you have $3,000 available to start a photography business, hire a designer. Spend $2,500 on the actual website, and then $500 in, whatever lens you want to buy. It's totally that important to just spend that much time and energy and give your business what it deserves, which is that time and hard work and creating something that people are going to want to. They just can't get enough of you. They want to work with you. You look professional. There's no doubt in their mind that you're the one to be there for their special day or special event.
And it is themeforest.net, so we'll make sure to link to that in the show notes as well. For those listening in, you can check out that resource. And then do you have a last big takeaway that our listeners should keep in mind?
Yeah, this one's kind of broad, but it's super important. Just start studying design. I'm not suggesting that you go get a college degree in it, but simply just get familiar with what good design versus bad design looks like. Look at some successful businesses and their websites, rather than hopping around the internet from site to site. Actually sit down and take some time and a few extra minutes to look at how each page is laid out. Where do your eyes go when you first get to that page? Why do they go there? Google questions like what makes a professional logo, or what are some examples of a good website design versus a bad website design. One of the things that I was looking up was like Trader Joe's. Everybody knows Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. They're both very different businesses, and there's a blog online somewhere about them, but their design is very intentional. Who they're targeting is very obvious in their branding, and there's just no question about how they run their business, how they designed everything was very intentional to target a certain market. So just kind of start flirting with the idea of paying more attention to design and how things look and why they look that way and why you're interested in them or not interested in them.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there really are so many resources out there. Just simply making the effort to go to Google and doing a search can bring up a lot of information. One of the things that I've done on multiple occasions is to search minimalist website design.
Yeah.
And that's been extremely inspiring as well, to see how other companies or other designers have taken away that noise that we're talking about while still effectively guiding that individual, the potential client, through their brand and through their website without the extra, without the clutter, really. Because I think it's easy, especially as photographers, we want to make sure we get as many images up there and talk all about our brand and the service and our background and our history. And then the websites just become so cluttered and they get in the way of actually selling the brand and the service effectively. And so it's important to...
Which, I mean, and that's a hard balance too. We have a lot of text on our website, but it's because Google requires a lot,
Sure.
And then you just jump into SEO, which is like learning Chinese. I mean, it's just a totally different thing. But Google requires you to have lots of text, but you can make it look good and make people actually want to read it and entice people by studying typography and learning, how to guide people's eyes to where you ultimately want them to go. So it's definitely a big learning curve. And I've spent a lot of years studying it and learning from Mike. He's very stubborn and strict on his design. He, again, will, move things two pixels to the left or right for about 2 days, trying to figure out which direction looks better. So yeah, just spending some time really studying that side of things.
Well, this has been a loaded topic and a conversation loaded with lots of information. And I really appreciate, Taylor, you taking time to share your perspective and what you and Mike have learned and implemented in your business regarding design. Where can our listeners learn more about what you're doing? Where can they follow you online and on social media?
Yeah, thank you. So we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. If you go to our website, taylorjonesphotography.com, and scroll to the bottom, all of our icons are there. But if you go on Facebook and look up Taylor Jones Photography, we're there. And then our Instagram handle is at Taylor Jones Photography.
Perfect. Thank you truly so much for making time to share with the Bokeh Podcast today. We'll make sure to link to all these resources in the show notes. But Taylor, thanks so much for sharing with the Bokeh Podcast listeners.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan.
Thanks so much for listening to the Bokeh Podcast today. Will you let us know what you think by leaving a review of the podcast in iTunes or maybe in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast, maybe suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My direct email is nathan@photographersedit.com. The Bokeh Podcast is brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. Just visit photographersedit.com.